Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas expressed by the guest, myself, or commenters may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It is the state of giving or receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to more complex form. So what is enlightenment evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to more complex human being living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is simulcast live every Wednesday at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific from the Enlightenment Evolution Hour page, Matrix Minds Facebook page, and the ET Whisper YouTube channel. It is also redistributed from the Forbidden Knowledge News Network and Conscious Awakening Network. All right, everybody, welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I'm your host, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer, and we are here live. Today we have a very, very special guest. Sue Frederick will be with us in just a few minutes. Before that, I do need to go over a few things. First of all, yes, the Atom Twister, as always, very perceptive and saw that there is a new entrance, new intro into the show, and we did have to change it around a little bit. The Matrix Minds Facebook page was not liking it too well, and all of you brainiacs out there in the Matrix Minds know a lot about the problems that page has had with kind of beating up Matthew a bit, and I didn't want to harm his ability to reach people, so I changed that for no more problems with that. But I also figured instead of telling you all the networks and all the simulcasts, I could just do in the intro and not have to bore you guys with it every week by saying it over again. So yes, hello out there, everyone. ET Whisper YouTube page, hello everybody, love you guys. Everyone, Matrix Minds, Brainiacs, hello, and all of you in the Enlightenment Evolution Hour Facebook page, welcome, and all of you who are listening afterwards, welcome to the show. We have a few announcements. We'll go quickly through them. And of course, when I say that, I'm always without my page in front of me. Next week, we have the Sedona group coming in. This is all of the people who will be at the Transcendence event, the Sedona Transcendence Retreat. If you haven't heard anything about that, we'll be releasing a video which has a warm-up preview where all of us came in and channeled. All of the channelers who will be at that event. Ruben Langdon was there to host. The lady who created the event, Suzanne Ross, will be there also. So it'll be a great group next week, and you'll have a preview of that before they get here about what that show will look like and some of the people who are coming. Also, we have on the 16th, we'll have Riz Mizra, who will also be going to Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles in February, and his wife Oriah Mizra will also be on the show on the 23rd of August. And we have guests to be announced. If you want to keep in the loop for what's going on with our stuff and with all of the energies that we have related to the show and the guests that are coming and all those things, go to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour on Facebook. For right now, that's the best place to get the information, heads up days before, but we like to share the link out to all the social medias the day of. So hope you guys enjoy that. For the ET Whisper, the only announcements that I have for that are related to the events that are coming up. Pardon me. And the events that are coming up in September, I believe 11th, 12th, and 13th. No, I'm sorry, the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. In September, I will be at the 3-day Sedona retreat. It's the Sedona Transcendence Retreat, which is an amazing lady, Suzanne Ross, who created that. They have 2 of them a year. I'll be at this one and next year's earlier event, but this time coming up, I'm going to be there for 3 days. One of the days we'll all be connecting and meeting and speaking, and the next day I'll be doing a 90-minute workshop indoors, and the day after that I will be out and about in the great wilds of Sedona to some beautiful places that the guides are going to take us while we're doing outdoor retreat. And both of the nights, on the last 2 nights, we will be doing CE5s if you get the VIP pass. So you can always check that out. Go to etwhisper.com and click on the Sedona poster, not the one on the left, which is the later event, which is the Conscious Life Expo in LA. But check out that one. And it'll give you all the details, take you to the website. If you have any questions, you can always contact the lady who runs it, Suzanne Ross. She's very, very accessible and very awesome. So check that out, guys. And as for the ET Whisper announcements, also, Kalina Angel just put a new video up last week. We gave the link out last week. It's really amazing. She loves all of the energy that you guys have been sharing with her. And that's about it. I think that's about it for announcements. If I think of them later before we jump off, I'll definitely drop those. But I want to focus on the reason why we're here today. Sue Frederick is here with us today, and she is a channel, clairvoyant, claircognizant, clairaudient who receives wisdom from the guides of departed loved ones to help her clients heal grief and find purpose with her powerful intuition. Sue used sacred numerology and mystic information to facilitate access into the soul's view. She has been a guest on hundreds of radio shows and TV interviews and featured in major magazines, newspapers, is the author to more than 11 books. She is an ordained unity minister, a lifelong intuitive, past life and between life soul regression therapist, master numerologist, and she's helped thousands of people to realign their soul's purpose and connect to departed loved ones. She's also been featured around the world on several mainstream organizations and had her work featured in many various places. And I think, just like always, instead of doing what I could do and read through the entire biography or go to her website and read pages from there, the best way to get to know someone is to talk to them. So we're going to welcome in Sue right now. Welcome, Sue. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Oh, such a pleasure to be with you, Rob. You're awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and I did not know before we started that you're actually someone who has some appreciation for the work I do too, which is always nice to hear, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming on tonight. I want to start where we always start with people. It's not about the journey, it's not about where you started, but it's about where you really start. And to me, the perspective of understanding the types of things that you had gone through as a child into your young adulthood, maybe even into your middle adulthood, these types of things that helped craft the person that you were, that was ready to be a clairvoyant, a channel, a numerologist, a writer. What types of things created interest in those areas as a child that kind of helped mold you into this?
Well, I was always a hypersensitive, hyper intuitive, hyper emotional child. And it was the 50s when I was growing up. And so those were not valued traits, you could say.
Yeah.
And so I sort of was the oddball from the beginning, especially in the South. And I wasn't the kind of Southern girl that my mom had hoped for. And instead, I was always asking weird questions, talking about some strange spirit I had just seen in church, or telling mom that at night I heard voices singing in my bedroom. And my parents, I love my father so much, especially he's crossed now, but he was a good Catholic man and he so much wanted me to be able to go to heaven. So he was always trying to help understand what was going on with me. But I'd have precognitive dreams and I'd come to the breakfast table and share them. And then later in that day or the next day, that exact thing would happen. And while my mother had come from a French Creole family, and she had seen her much older sister. She was the youngest of 12, I think. Her much older sister had been quite clairvoyant and was put into mental institute for that. That was how things were in the 40s.
Oh,
And so she told me, my mom told me quite early on that I better keep it to myself, you know? So I
that's
was,
rough.
yeah, I was given that message that, yeah, these dreams might be happening. You might know these things, but it's not really going to serve you in life. So I just tried so hard to be normal. But, you know, all of us have some version of that happening in our lives. I know so many people are very sensitive, intuitive, highly evolved souls when they're children, and I think that makes us more susceptible to emotional wounds. And the way it took my life was that I really believed that the only thing I could do that was of any merit was writing, because writing is where I could channel in things and write them, and they were beautiful, and I would get a lot of accolades at school, and I was called the school poet when I was in high school, and all of it was pure channeling in through writing. And when I went so then the reality of that hit when I was planning to go to college and I wanted to study creative writing. And my very left brain logical family was like, well, you can't make a living that way. You have to go to journalism school if you're going to make your living writing. And so I went off to University of Missouri to become a journalist, and if you had known me then, Rob, you would have known I was totally incapable of interviewing people like a journalist should be able to do. I was just so shy, you know? Um, but it was perfect. It did teach me how to write in a way that eventually I was able to make my living from. With magazines, I wrote for health magazines, but that comes much later. And it's why I've written 11 books now. But all along, I was a spiritual seeker. You know, I really wanted to understand why I had these experiences and who was God. And I was growing up, I went to Catholic schools for until I was 18 and went to college. So I was definitely very interested in what is the truth about who God is, where do the people go when they die? And you know, what is the purpose of all this? I was asking those questions in my teen years. And it wasn't until I left home to go to college, 1969, it was a great year of a lot of openings in the world, and then suddenly I was taking yoga and studying theosophy and doing all these things at 17 years old that I've kinda always wanted to do but didn't have access to, and it was exhilarating, and so of course I was kind of disowned by my family in all of that. But it was a wonderful time for me of blossoming and finding like-minded souls and realizing I didn't have to live the conventional life that I'd been raised in.
That's beautiful, and you know, growing up in that time, especially, I understand through listening to my parents share stories with me. Anything that wasn't, you know, shut your mouth and work for someone or find a way to work for
Mhm,
yourself within the frame of society, it was shunned, frowned
mhm,
upon, and not looked at well. And my mom, also very naturally psychic, but with her Christian philosophy, only sees it as a gift that God might give her in those
mhm,
occasions. So yeah, it's a very different thing. But even in the '80s, when I was a kid, although it was much more acceptable and accepted in society, it was still very small percentage of Americans who understood anything more than you know, lightly off religious spirituality, which has
mhm.
always been interesting to me too. And where did you go from that point? You know, once you really started blossoming and feeling that and breaking away, where did you go from that onto your path?
Well, in my 20s, I kind of hit my stride. I was living with I had an alternative group of friends, you could say. We even started an organic farming commune in Missouri in the early 70s. And we were
Wow.
gonna, yeah, we were kind of way ahead of our time. And but then, of course, we all had to make a living to pay off the land. And then that kind of split us all up. We all ended up pursuing careers. And I was a Montessori teacher because I've always been able to connect very deeply with children, very open-hearted with children.
Oh
But
man.
then but then I wanted to oh, I know what it was. The man that I was living with in those early days of my 20s, I just adored him. And um, he well, he broke my heart. I'm very grateful to him because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have launched out and become who I am. But when he broke my heart, I decided I needed to toughen up in the world, And when you're deeply sensitive and intuitive and you have a lot of Pisces in your chart, like I do, you just cry way too easily. And I interpreted that as being weak. And so I felt like, well, I need to toughen up. So I signed up for an outward bound survival course in Maine in the mid 70s and lived on an open pulling boat in Maine for 3 weeks and learned to rock climb and did all that stuff that was, very popular in the 70s for overcoming fears. And in doing that, I realized, wow, I'm good at this and I'm good at helping other people overcome their fears, and ended up in Colorado teaching Colorado outward bound, leading groups up 14,000-foot mountains in my 20s. I swear, Rob, I weighed like 90 pounds. I was so not built for it. But I had this determination, and that's where I met Paul, my husband, my soulmate, who saw me for really my deeper, highest self and loved me unconditionally, really for the first time in my life. And we were so in love, and we were both mountaineers and very much in alignment spiritually. We didn't believe in conventional religion, but we believed in spiritual principles. And then he was diagnosed with colon cancer suddenly, and we spent a year going through magnificent spiritual healers back in 1979, and even an amazing Native American healer, Chief Fool's Crow, who blew my mind and still continues to from the other side. And Paul's journey of healing took me on my journey of spiritual awakening because we saw and experienced so many extraordinary, out of the ordinary, spirit-driven events. And then he died in my arms in 1980. But his death was his greatest gift because his soul, the way he played it out in front of me, was such a conscious death that I saw his soul leave his body and lift out of his body and fly out to the mountains. And it was so vivid and so real and so extraordinary that from then on, I could never believe that we were physical beings. I just knew that our true essence, all of us, was souls on a brief journey to Earth.
That's so powerful, and as sad as it is to lose a loved one in any way, shape, or form, not to experience them the way we do here, having that unique experience, gifting you with that, plus your ability to connect with them afterwards. You get to experience a whole different version of that energy, I would imagine.
Mhm.
So that's a beautiful thing, and thank you for sharing that. And you said that this death was a expression of birth for you in this spiritual journey.
Mhm.
um, where did you go from that point forward? Take us from there to when you started connecting to your own work and sharing it too.
Well, I think one of the greatest blessings of that time of Paul's exit was that I was gifted by a friend a reading from a numerologist, and I didn't know anything about numerology. I knew about astrology, but I really didn't know much about numerology. And she sat down with me for an hour and changed my life and explained the soul mission that I had picked out and the one that Paul had chosen, and how they intertwined in a soul agreement to show us the hardest and highest lessons of grace and surrender, and what my journey here on earth was to do now, why I was still here. Those were the questions I needed answered, and nobody else could give me those answers. Why am I still here? Why can't I just go be with him? So this numerology, 1980, there's no access to the internet. There's no internet. There's hardly any books on numerology. And so I started a notebook where I'd get everybody I knew's birthday, and I would figure out their chart and everything about their path. And then it was really the path of inquiry, learning what it all meant by studying different people in my life and the path they were on. And then I would, of course, try to find a book to validate it, but that was even hard to do back then. And it just gave me that higher understanding that we are souls who come to earth with a mission, and that when things appear tragic, they're often our greatest blessing. And in Paul's case, his exit from my life in the physical realm made him a powerful presence in my life in the spiritual realm. And to this day, he is still teaching me, like tweaking my direction, telling me when I need to make some changes and this and that. And I am so grateful for that. And I know that we agreed to that experience of falling in love, and then him leaving early and me staying here to learn and evolve and to do the work I'm doing with him helping me do it.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily powerful energy, and it's hard for us to want sometimes to look at those things. You look at
Mhm,
situations with loved ones who are extraordinarily ill, or who have been born into this world with certain conditions, or just
mhm,
anything that you have, and you're like, oh my God, on a human level, I just love this person so much.
mhm,
And I hate watching them suffer, and I hate watching them go through it. But as a soul, to have someone brave enough to enter a life and stay in for such a short time to give
mhm.
you this one great gift and to give you this blessing, it's actually swells my heart with enjoyment to understand that souls who love one another are willing to go through that for one another,
And
even though it's
Rob,
a
if it's okay, I'd like to share what Paul has told me is the reason why he went through it, because
oh yes.
it's not just, I mean, yes, it was a gift for me, but for him. And what I've learned is that some very advanced souls, highly evolved souls, will choose physical suffering in the body as a way of burning up any negativity that they may feel has been lingering in their consciousness, because it totally opened Paul's heart. I mean, by the time he crossed, he was just pure love, pure light. And so we agreed that he would take that path of suffering for his own evolutionary purposes. And now he has a phenomenal job in the divine realms and is very respected as a highly evolved being. And, and in the process of me walking through that with him, I would learn how to help other people who might either be grieving or going through an illness, to understand the different perspective of looking at it from our soul's lens. And so it's a two-way street. And I work with a lot of grieving people now who've lost children, who've lost loved ones. And it's always the case that there was an exchange or an interaction of soul missions, and that it was planned before the lifetime began. And so when we can lift ourselves up to look at it from that perspective, not from the human mind, the ego story, I call it the divine lens perspective. When we can look at it that way, even for a few minutes in the day, if we can't do it all the time, it's very hard because we're humans. We have one foot in the human realm, one foot in the divine. But as we lean more into that divine perspective, that's where our healing is, no matter what terrible grief we may be experiencing.
I really, really resonate with that highly. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure too, with your husband, as he experienced that and got to evolve his own consciousness so highly, even outside of the work that he does with you in connection, I'm sure he helps a lot of souls who are still grieving as they go. I know a lot of humans carry trauma with them into
Right.
that step. So that's a
That
beautiful thing.
Rob, that's what he told me. He said he helps souls when they're crossing over
Yes.
who are still carrying trauma and pain, especially from physical suffering.
Oh my word, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I
Mhm,
picked that up. Most souls who get that master
mhm,
class in the last couple of years of their life are going to do something with it afterwards, unless
mhm.
they're one of the super adventurous souls who are like, all right, lesson learned, let's jump right back in and do it again, you know. That's amazing. I really love that. It's beautiful. So can you tell us your first experience then with consciously being aware of his consciousness and soul, and the first time that you got a message or a direct communication from
Mhm.
any consciousness on the soul side?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I literally now know there's a term for it. It's called a shared death experience, is what I went through for 3 to 4 weeks after Paul crossed, because he lifted my consciousness up and really kind of took me to the divine realms and showed me how it works, that there's a divine order to things. And the way was teaching me that is, for example, I would maybe start to take some vitamins or something. I was very much into health, and I would take some vitamins, and two of them would fall out of my hand and on the floor. And Paul would say, even small things like that are of divine order. Those two don't serve you. And he was just feeding this to me constantly for weeks. And I was so brought into the higher realms with him that I could hardly eat. I was losing a lot of weight. I was very thin at the time. So there was a certain point where he sort of let it go and shut down the portal, because I needed to get grounded back here on the earth, because it wasn't my time to cross. And that's kind of when then I crashed into the grief and the pain and all of that of losing Paul. But then, the first night after he crossed, he was in bed with me. I felt his body, I felt his legs. I just knew it was him. He was holding me, and I was like, "Oh, Paul, you're here." And then this being of light reached over me and tapped him, and he lifted up, because he wasn't allowed, their souls aren't allowed to stay with you very long when they first cross, because they need to keep moving up the higher realms. But the funny, amazing gift I got was that Paul died in July. And in December of that same year, my very best girlfriend from first grade, who I'd always been so close to, we processed life together, grew up in the South together, and got ourselves out of the South. She came to visit me in Colorado after Paul died, and we went skiing, and we were having these phenomenal conversations about the meaning of life and all of this. And she fell on the mountain slope and got a bruise. And by the time we took her to the airport to go back home to California, her leg was terribly bruised. And we were both like, wow, you must have broken something. And so she got on the plane, and by the time she landed in California, there were bruises all over her body, and she was taken to the ER and diagnosed with very aggressive leukemia. So
Oh
this was a
no.
few months after Paul died, right? And so I kind of look at it as, boy, before I jumped into this lifetime, we were all hanging out, meeting together. And I said, you guys are evolving so much faster than me. I really need to be pushed in this lifetime to wake up and do good work for the world. And so Paul and Chrissy said, all right, we can help you, because we have our own reasons that we want to leave early in this life. And so Chrissy's exit was more painful, because I'd known her since I was 6 or 7 years old and loved her. And it was right on top of Paul's. And here's what Chrissy gifted me with. On a year later, she was in remission, and I was trying to go on with life. And one night, Chrissy was all night with me in my dreams, taking me on a trip, making me laugh like crazy, because we had always laughed together so hard as children, as girlfriends. And when I would laugh with Chrissy, she would always make me laugh so hard that my stomach muscles would hurt. And it was a very certain kind of laughter that she created in me, where I'd go, Chrissy, stop. I can't breathe. You have to stop making me laugh. My stomach hurts so bad. And so this night, when she was taking me around and showing me things, she was making me laugh that way. And I would wake up and I'd feel my stomach muscles hurting, and I'd go, gosh, I'm with Chrissy and she's making me laugh so much. I didn't know that she had crossed. And I'd kind of fall back to sleep, and she was flying me around and showing me friends of ours and making me laugh at all of it and saying, isn't it all beautiful and crazy at once? And we were just having the best time. And I woke up in the morning and thought, oh, I was with Chrissy all night. And then I was like, oh no, I was with Chrissy all night. And I called her mom, and her mom said that she had gone into a coma and crossed that night. But she came to me right away, Rob, to show me that once we're free of the body, we're back in the unconditional love and joy of the higher realms.
That is a beautiful gift, and we've had even a lot of people reflect in our chat, how tough that had to have been on you in the emotional, mental sense of that. But those rewards that you get are something people crave. I remember even after developing my channeling, the greatest loss I ever had before my father passed was a dear friend, and he died of a drug overdose. And this was back in the
Mm,
time I was using drugs too. We used drugs the same night that he died.
mhm,
But that was the worst it got for me, and that tore me up. But my dad was like my best friend, and
mhm,
I remember after his death, it took, oh God, a month and a half, 2 months minimum just to be able to connect with him in the dream state.
mm,
I could feel the presence of him, but I couldn't
mhm,
connect like I wanted to. So to have this happen the day that they passed, the moment they passed, the
mhm.
energy, what a great gift, because it is such a hard thing to lose your physical co-creation with these people that you love so much.
Well, I think I know grief has been my greatest spiritual teacher in this life. And that's exactly why I'm doing the work I do of helping grieving people remember and realize what those soul agreements are with their departed, and also why they're still here on earth, what work their soul came to do. And every time I'm able to help someone, especially grieving moms, my heart is with them so much.
God, yeah.
So every time I'm able to help one connect to their beautiful child, I always want to teach them to connect, because I don't think they have to go through a medium or somebody like me. They have their own ability. So a big part of my work is helping grievers understand that they have the tools to have that healing conversation with their departed. But also, because I'm a writer, it's always come in, my channeling has come in first, always from through writing. So before I work with a client and do a session, I connect to their departed and ask them to write through me what they want to say to the person here on earth who's grieving them. And they will write pages through me, Rob. And it's so amazing. It's, when I'm really connected, the words are coming so quickly, I can hardly get them down on the paper. I'm taking notes as fast as I can. And then, I let it go and we start the session, and I'll say, here's what I came through in the writing, and I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to edit it. And you just tell me if you think this is really your departed. And they always, at the end of me reading it, they're like, oh my God, yes. And it's not me, it's the departed wanting to help them heal, because they're still here on earth for a purpose.
There's two things I want to reflect from what you just said. The first thing, I highly admire you for offering to teach people how to do it themselves. This is an industry where you can really kind of tell the difference between people who want to help or people who are more disconnected from it and are just using the gift that they have as an aspect to care for themselves financially, which is okay too. If you don't want to get emotionally involved with people, um, that's your thing. It's no judgment there, but I really respect the people on the first half of that who can actually teach people. This is why I've taught people how to channel for almost
Mhm.
as long as I've channeled. I believe that everyone has the ability to do these things themselves. And by teaching that person that, you're giving them an opportunity of great freedom.
That's
Um,
right.
and I really, really love that. And the second thing I wanted to say too, you know, uh, I actually forgot the second thing I was going to say. Um, Oh, the consciousness as to someone losing a loved one and the writing down and the energy of that flow. Um, the the healing that comes from that is obviously a huge thing, but what kind of things come through on average? Is it very personalized information for the people so that they understand and know, that this is their loved one, or is it more just emotional things that they're sharing from their new perspective?
Well, what I have learned because of doing this work for so long, for decades, is that every medium or channeler, of course, has their own way of doing it. And I've always been this heartfelt, intuitive, sensitive person. And so when I ask the departed to channel through me, they know that I can feel their emotions. And so they write these, but the wording is so different from every soul. That's how it really shows me that it's from them. But the words they use, the emotions they express, how they're trying to help their loved one heal on earth and all of that, it comes in with a great emotional power because my heart is really the center of my channeling abilities. Some mediums work in their heads, and it's very much about little pieces of detailed evidence. But in my way of working, I am feeling what that soul is trying to tell their griever. And so I let that emotion pour through me. And it's quite intense. I mean, I always feel like I'm getting to spend emotional time with that being as they try to pour the words through to comfort their mother or their spouse or whoever it is. But yet the wording of it is what helps the parents understand, oh yes, that's the way my child would say it.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people in our community, or people who have never been in our community, especially, are very weary, just because there are people that are out there that don't have such great intentions and stuff. So people, I've noticed, especially when grieving, this is what kept me from my own dad for so long after his passing. It wasn't him. It was my
Right,
own mental overstimulation of questioning everything about how
right.
I would connect and all of those things too. So, and that's why I wondered, because I know a lot of people in that grieving place want to be very much. They're already going through emotional turmoil, so they lean on their minds a lot, or at least
Mhm,
the people who I've seen too. So it's
mhm.
very beautiful. That you're able to deliver that too with them, with the emotional aspects of that, and give them that confirmation.
I think it's so important that people like us are giving a message to humans on earth that the heart needs to lead the way. The heart needs to be what you trust and not the logic mind, because our culture completely tells you that the logic mind is telling you the truth, the earth mind. And the more evolved we become here as a collective, the more we're aware, no, 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 the mind is just something we have here to help us do the laundry when we're in the physical world. I'm exaggerating, but the heart is where the truth is, and that's where the soul speaks up, and that's where we connect to the highest realms. And so by helping grieving people or any people who are struggling to realize that initial gut feeling or that initial knowingness that you got the minute you saw that sign and you thought it might be from your son, before the mind came in and made you doubt it and say, oh, that's a coincidence, blah, 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 blah. If we can teach people to trust that first knowingness, we are helping shift consciousness here to really be open-hearted beings. And that's the consciousness tipping point we're at right now as a collective. Are we going to live in our logical, cold minds, or are we going to realize that our hearts carry the essence of our spiritual divinity and of our truth and our connection to the highest realms? And how do we live more from that place of heart?
I really love that, and that's something that my own guides have shared with a lot of people too. Is that the place you find a lot of your intuition and things, even if you are a heavily mentally minded person, is look into the emotional self. But I feel like some people in our community have a very high mental state, and the others have a high emotional state. And sometimes the mental people can get so far into the mental they can't connect with the emotions, and vice versa with the emotions not being able to
Mhm.
connect with the mental. And we need both as a
Yeah.
physical being in some way, but I
Yeah.
think the mind is more to help us process what we're receiving from the intuition and the emotion, but you can't really get to that point without the emotion. So it's an
Right.
extremely cool thing to look at, how people are able to integrate. I've seen the most logical people in the world be able to finally connect through their emotions, and emotional people had no problems with the connection part, but they had a problems with processing it afterwards or remembering it or
Mhm.
connecting to it too.
Mhm.
So I really love that. Um, can you tell me how to that you got started into numerology? Because that's something that I'm always very interested in. I don't know a lot about the way that people process it or the way that they find the
Mhm.
information, but I'm always surprised at the accuracy of people when
Mhm.
they connect with that information of my own or others.
Well, let's talk about your path, Rob.
Yeah, let's talk about it. We'll start off with my birthday being January 4, 1980, which
So you're the Capricorn 5-path soul, and I just got to say that I love 5-path souls. If any of my friends are listening to this, they're going to be going, "Oh God, yes, he's a 5-path soul. Sue will totally love him." And it's interesting because the 5 is the path of completely living an open-hearted, passionate, fearless life, just going at life 100 miles an hour to absorb it. You talked about earlier in your life, you might have done drugs. That's such a 5-path thing because you're here to experience it all and to sort of gobble it up and transform it into spiritual teachings and spiritual wisdom. Some 5 paths are, they get lost in the gobbling up of the physical passions of the world, and they don't rise up and align with their spirit to be the teacher like you are, the healer, the channeler. And yet people like you, and I have a beautiful girlfriend, Elizabeth Boisson, who's a 5-path, and she lost 2 children, and she started a nonprofit called helpingparentsheal.org, and she's devoted her whole life to helping grieving parents know that they can hear from and connect to their children. And she's a 5-path. And these 5-path souls like you and Elizabeth are fearless, and the world loves you all. You have a natural charisma. And so people will watch your podcast and come to your talks and listen to your channeling. And that's how we are going to tip consciousness here, is when the people like you have so much charisma and so many gifts of courage and open-heartedness, tell the world there is no death, that we're all spirits on a journey, then we have the world's attention.
well, I really appreciate that. And We had talked a little bit about this before when I gave you my birthday, and you told me I was a 5, and I was always interested in kind of knowing what that meant. So it's a charisma based, and you said through the aspects of my earlier life, kind of transmuting those into my ability to now share and teach. Is that anything like the
Mhm.
wounded healer archetype that you heal about?
Yeah, I mean, for you, I've never met a 5 path who didn't have some wild story about their younger years, but that's on purpose, you know? You're pulled to experience it all because you're gonna transform that into healing energy for the world. It's the opposite of a monk's life, for example, where a monk lives in their head and studies and analyzes, but has never lived from their heart. The 5 path comes in with wide open energy. Now, I will say a 5 path can get very wounded as a child because they are so open-hearted and an open-spirited and beautiful and charismatic. But what I've learned is that all of us get beat up at some way in our childhood because this earth dense energy is very tough. And once we land in this earth realm, it's a shock, because we're higher evolved beings than this earth realm is. And those who are very open hearted, like you, and I guess I'd say like me as well, we do take on some wounds in those early years. But then our free will kicks in and helps us find ways to heal ourselves, knowing, being guided by our own inner wisdom, our own intuition, our spirit guides, knowing that on some level we did come here to help others. And the only way we can do that is if we really address our own wounds and healing. And the way those wounds have affected us become a real explanation of what our gifts are for healing and helping others.
That makes so much sense and resonates. I think as far as it happens, my childhood, my teenage years, I got into a lot of trouble, a lot of violence, and eventually into drugs, which lasted into my mid 20s, and then from that point forward, it really gave me a better perspective on judging people.
Mhm,
Because I would hear people just, oh, drug addicts are worthless, this, and oh,
mm,
you're just choosing to be a junkie, and all of these horrible things that people say about drug addicts. But most everyone I've met who've been some of the most kindest, open-hearted, loving people had drug problems, and they got through that, and that's what helped create that
and
energy.
Rob, I believe that somebody who has an addiction problem is simply trying to reach the higher dimensions. They know they're here on earth. They're disappointed in what they see here. They have a memory of something much more amazing, filled with unconditional love, which is the divine realms. And so they're so disappointed in the earth realm that they try alcohol or drugs to re-experience that place that they've come through. Their conscious mind doesn't understand this, but this is what their behavior is doing. And at first, when we take a drug or a drink, yes, we have a kind of out of body experience. We have that wonderful exalted feeling of love. But what we've learned through history is that that does not sustain itself. Instead, it starts destroying us emotionally and physically in many ways. And yet it's a spiritual seeking act, in my opinion. And that's why I always tell people, if you say that you had a child who struggled with addictions and never could get their life together, what I say to you is that was a highly evolved soul who was seeking God. And you can't judge from looking at it at the outside whether they did experience God while in the body or not, because we don't know another person's story. And the way it looks on the outside is usually the opposite of what's really going on in that journey.
I really resonate with that too. It was the very first time I ever got high. When I was 13, I smoked some really great weed, and it took me to a place of just like, wow, all these things I feel empty about, all the things
Mhm.
that I don't feel satisfied with, I can find here, because this is
Mhm.
not like being on earth. This elevates
Right.
my
You
self.
feel
Yeah.
connected. Yeah.
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 Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Rob, a funny story, I told you I went off to college in 1969, and anybody who's as old as me would remember that that was a year of marching against the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
All of the boys my age were being drafted off to that terrible war, and it was also the time of psychedelic drugs hitting our culture. And so all of my friends, on a Friday night, they would drop a tab of acid or mescaline or psilocybin, and of course smoke pot. And because of my hypersensitivity, I guess, um, I couldn't I had such out of body experiences. So here's an example. One night, my friend Marv said, "Hey, why don't you just try a half tab of this? It's really pure. I'll be with you the whole night. I'll take care of you." And so I did this half a tab of some kind of acid, and instantly I saw God, and I saw all the interconnections between everything and everyone, and that there was nothing to fear on earth. It was all part of a divine interplay of energy. And the traffic in the road looked beautiful to me. It was light, it was pure light. And so I started walking out into the street going, "It's so beautiful and it's all love." And my friend Marv was pulling me back on the sidewalk, and he was going, "You are never going to do drugs again. I'm never letting you do drugs." And so I think I was the only hippie in America in the late 60s and early 70s who would sit with my friends while they were doing it, but I couldn't do it myself, or I would just go into the other realms.
That is amazing. It recalls back a story. Kalina, my wife, who's also amazing, she had the same problem just with pot. She
Mhm,
smoked pot
mhm.
only a couple times ever, and it just really took her to a wild place. One of
Yeah,
them was not a good place because
right.
she wasn't in a good place, and the other was also put her in the dirt, but she was able to see, the feelings of her plants and all of these
Mhm.
really cool things too. So that's funny. That's really amazing. And she too is like you, very sensitive soul who feels, is just deeply feels and connects that
Well,
way.
tell your wife that she's my soul sister. I can totally relate.
I will definitely do that. That's amazing story too in the journey. It's that's funny. That time of Earth, my both of my parents went through it. My dad a bit more than my mom. She was about 6 years younger than my dad, but
Mhm,
they both went through the late 60s, and it was a very heavy energetic time too for the war and the
mhm.
drafting and all of that. Kalina,
Yeah.
my wife's father, went into Vietnam and served as a
Oh.
helicopter pilot for
Oh,
the medical
oh my
teams.
gosh, that's the
Yeah.
most intense job.
Yeah, he got shot
Um,
down twice in Vietnam, so it was very, very heavy energy
mm,
and a lot of death and PTSD.
mhm,
Uh, since you've had time to reflect on that and you got to
mhm,
experience that part of the Earth's history,
mhm.
what do you feel these waves of things are in our collective, like
Yeah.
wars and peacetime and politics?
It's interesting because in numerology, what I've learned is that for example, if we look at the 60s as the decade of six, of the energy of the six, it was all about the heart and the community, and meaning that we had had this war that we said was the good war when World War II happened, and definitely it was sort of more of a light overcoming darkness event. But then in the 60s, our lesson was learning to love each other as a community, to connect in a whole different way than we'd ever dealt with before. And so when you talk about the free love of the 60s in its soul yearning, it was about connecting soul to soul. And then suddenly we're in this war where war is no longer a paradigm that humans can do good with in the world. So we've shifted to a higher level of love and compassion now, and yet the military system still is putting people in a war. And that's where this schizophrenic break happened, to where these more evolved souls are going, I'm not going to go over there and kill somebody just because the man tells me to do it. In fact, my current husband is a beautiful soul. I'm so grateful for him. And he was drafted, and he's my age. And they asked him in the first stages of whatever that word is, bringing him into the military, if a commander tells you to charge up a hill and kill someone, will you do it? And the only acceptable answer is yes, sir. And Gene said, no fucking way. So he did not get drafted. He got a different title put behind his name. But I admire him for that so much. I mean, so many souls like him stood up to that time. And now, of course, it's all different. The lessons are so different now. But one thing I will say about war is that if you do become involved in the war, if you find yourself serving in military, if it's not just done through drones and you're actually in the thick of it, it's a time of highly accelerated soul growth. And I know that's against everything we want to think about war. But
Right.
when you are experiencing that kind of death, that kind of horrors, your soul is evolving and accelerating its awareness so quickly. Even if you come back and you're an alcoholic and you live on the street, your heart has been opened, and you can do with that what your free will wants to do with it. But the acceleration of growth that happens in wartime is maybe still needed on the planet, and maybe that's why it's still happening.
That's a beautiful perspective, and when it comes to the aspect of soldiers, and I only remember one life where I had an active soldier, and I remember the feeling wasn't I want to kill my enemies. The feeling
Mhm.
was after being forced in war as a child and then growing up. My perspective was I'm trying to join the world together. I want these
Right,
people to be not oppressed, and I want to give them freedom. And even
right,
though that's not a great ideology for war, the purpose behind it, the intention behind it is
right,
actually much more pure of heart than what we think
right.
of people going to war, you know?
And that's why World War II was a good intentioned war, and my father served in that war, and his intention was so good, to save the world from Hitler, and that was a very pivotal time in consciousness where humanity had to stand up for the light, for the love, and so World War II had a completely different energy to it. I don't know, Rob. I don't know all the answers about that, but I do know I'm fascinated by stories that soldiers write about their war experiences. If you saw my bookshelf, it's all these spiritual books, and then it's all these books written by people who served in Vietnam or served in Afghanistan, because the intensity of that learning is so extraordinary. And when people can write about it beautifully, it's just the most heart-opening thing. In fact, this book comes to mind called The Yellow Birds, and it was written about the Afghanistan war, and it's just one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, written by a soldier who served in that war.
That's beautiful. I've never heard of that. I'll have to definitely check
Mhm,
that out. What with the numerology and the aspects of number, you said that you looked at the 60s as a six. So
mhm.
Uh, are you able to kind of look at the numerology through each year and kind of get an idea of maybe what's
Yeah.
coming around the corner?
Yeah, so right now we're collectively in a 7-year, all of us. That's different from our personal year cycles, which is a different thing. But collectively, the year 2023 digits down to a number 7. So 7 is the energy of spiritual growth, of intuition, of critical thinking, analyzing the world. So I like 7. Some people are just lose their minds when they're under the influence of 7, because they have no spiritual knowledge or tendencies. And so they just kind of go to the dark side of the 7, which is very critical and analytical and in the head. But
Mm.
next year, starting in January, we're going collectively into an 8 year. 8 is a year or a number of power. And it's so interesting when I hear people talk about next year, it seems to be an agreement that 2024 will be a very intense year. And the number 8 is about intensity. Like, it's not a shy, quiet, peaceful year. And because people are waking up and opening their hearts and evolving, I'm really hoping that 2024 becomes the year that standing up for the good use of power becomes the achievement. And rather than letting the wrong use of power dominate our society.
Yeah, I was just about to say that that idea of having power to the people, instead of the agencies of governments and all of
Mhm,
these ridiculous things that
mhm,
greedy people and corporations and governments do.
mhm,
Yeah, that's actually very in alignment with a lot of things Trev and Art have shared about this time period and frame. That
mhm,
the reason the world went crazy from 2015 on up is we had to get all the broken things to the surface. We saw,
mhm.
and I try not to get too directly caught up in the whole thing of what the world's thinking and doing, even though I want to understand. I try not to elicit my own emotion or thought to either side, just kind of stay in the center and see what happens in my own personal life. But
Mhm.
you had two groups of people going through the pandemic, and they were fighting about
Right,
everything.
right,
Both of them were fighting from a place of fear.
right.
One thought that they were going to lose their health and life, and the other thought they were going to lose their freedom, and that fear drove them to that energy. And the one thing that both of them had in common is they wanted to be happy. They wanted to grow. They
Right.
wanted to experience life in a good way, and circumstances weren't letting them from their perspective. So
Mhm,
I find it fascinating, the idea of so many people who had no interest in how the world works or how politics
mhm.
work. Now they're understanding. They're like, holy crap,
Right,
local level is where we change the things in our daily lives, and the state
right.
level is where we do this. I've always had not an interest in politics itself, but the mechanics behind how our world works. So I'm really
Yes.
happy to hear that it might be intense for us next year, but it also will bring us back the ability to regroup our power as a collective people
Mhm.
instead of entities overseeing us.
Yep, that has to happen. And
Yeah.
can I share that, you and many other spiritual workers talk about the shift that began to happen in 2015. Well, I need to tell you this vision that I had in 2014. At the time, I didn't know really why I was having it, but it makes complete sense now. Um, in 2014, I got really, really sick and got a very high fever. And because I'm this sensitive person here with all this Pisces in my path, I leave my body very easily, especially when I'm sick and have these out of body experiences. But in 2014, when I got this high fever, by about the second or third night of it, I was lifted out of my body and I was brought by guides and angels and held kind of out in outer space in the galaxy looking at planet Earth. And the guides showed me beams of light shooting up from the planet Earth all around the planet, and they were in motion, so that as the guides were showing it to me, the light was sparking, and one light would spark another. And I said, "What is that light?" And the guides said, "That is one soul waking up to their higher consciousness and seeing that it's all about love and compassion and connection." And as they wake up, they spark another soul to wake up. And they were saying, "See, Sue, all those lights are filling the globe and they're illuminating, they're moving into the dark crevices, and the light is always winning. the love is always winning. They just kept saying that in my ears. And they said, you have to go back and tell people this. You have to write about it. You have to teach it, to tell people that no matter how bad or grim things can look when we're in the thick of daily life, light is always winning. Love is always winning. And they were just so intense about it. It felt like 24 hours they were holding me there and telling me all this and showing me this globe. And then when I came back into my body, I couldn't even express it in words. It was such an all-encompassing experience that I'd had. And finally, I got my laptop and just started writing about it, because the only way I can make sense of the world most of the time is through writing. And I channeled in my newest book called Through a Divine Lens, because the guides were like, all right, things are going to get tough there. You have to write about how to align with the love and the light on earth. And that's what this book, the newest book, Through a Divine Lens, is about. All these little meditations and different techniques helping everyday people align with love and light, even in their fear, even in their darkest moments. And I thought, in 2014, when I had that vision, I thought life was going pretty well here on planet Earth. I know we have problems, but there had been no COVID. There was not the amount of political upheaval that we've had since then. But, right after that vision, boy, the next few years, I kept going, okay, so this is why they showed me that vision.
That's amazing. That's a beautiful thing too, to see the one person's consciousness shift and wake, to see the powerful impact of energy on the greater collective. And I also really, really love the fact that seeing that before, when it did gave a reference, because that's something not a lot of people were ready for. Trev Nardiv had shared with me, since I've known them, 2012 was a placeholder. It was like an energetic middle point on an 18-year cycle, like 9 years before and 9 years after. And what's 9 years after that? Well, it's 2021, and that's when the stuff was the most intense and the most crazy. So they said, look for something that's going to make everyone want to shift. And that's what the pandemic was, a great gift.
Right. And 9 is the number of completion and surrender to the highest lessons.
Oh, that's amazing. I did not know that. So 9 is like the wrapping it up, the putting all ends together. That's beautiful.
Yep. Oh, and this is why I love 5-path souls, because when you know your own birth path, if you add it to the other person's birth path, you get a single digit that tells you your soul agreement with them. And so, for example, I'm on the 22/4 path, you're on the 5 path. So our soul agreement is the number 9, ultimate and surrendering to the highest lessons, cumulative learning, all of this stuff. And of course, that's the soul agreement I had with my husband, Paul, who died in my arms. He certainly brought me to the ultimate lessons, the ultimate, experience of learning and surrendering to the highest lessons. So that's why I'm so drawn to people I have that 9 soul agreement with.
That's amazing. If I were to, for fun, to give you my wife's birthday, is that something you could see our paths together too?
Yes. Let me pull out my pen here.
I'm gonna send it to you in the private chat, because I don't know if she wants me to spit her birthday out verbally, but I'm going to
go ahead, put it in.
All right, there it is in the private chat on the right-hand side.
All right, let me just get that down here. Okay. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I just get all of these kind of realizations when I start adding them up and looking at all the different numbers in it. So you're beautiful. Oh, wow. So you guys are connected through so many lives here, as I'm sure you're aware. Let me look at 14, 15, 6. Ah, okay. so many lives, so many connection. You agreed to both take the sun sign of Capricorn because you knew you were coming in for intense spiritual work. And so you wanted to be able to be grounded enough in the physical reality that you could make a living and put a roof over your heads, but then at the same time be able to bring in this higher message of spiritual awakening. Now we know you're doing that, but she's on the 7 path, which means her soul is the old soul, the angelic wisdom soul, and that her whole intention for being here is spiritual growth. And she's
Oh yeah.
deeply intuitive, and she is only drawn to the truth, desperate and hungry to know the truth from the time she was a child. And and then to be able to have that Capricorn grounding for both of you, it's like you agreed to bring a family in or something because you knew you wanted to be able to have an everyday component to your life, raising children and having a home and all of that, while your work would be of the highest level of esoteric wisdom.
Jesus, that's amazing. I really do. I find it very amazing that you can extract that type of information with the numbers. It's beautiful. I never understood the greater aspects of it, and I know there's different types of numerology too
Yeah.
that people can perceive. But that's beautiful. I love that. She's not here with us tonight. She had some of her own work to do as the kids go down. That's our work time. So I'm going to share that with her tonight. I'm sure she'll love it when we
She's
get off.
also a good writer. I hope she knows that and is developing that skill.
Oh yeah, she's the best writer I know by a long
Oh,
shot.
good,
She's
good.
actually taught me how to be more proficient at. This is the gift we give each other. I was a fly by the seat of my pants. She's a very organized, and she
Mhm,
helped me be more organized, and I helped
mhm,
her live it in that moment a little more.
mhm.
So yeah, it's
So
actually a
here's
very
what's
beautiful thing.
interesting. Guess what? My husband, Gene, that I told you about, who I love and I'm so grateful to be with, he's a 7 path as well.
That's amazing.
So great. There's no such thing as a coincidence, I'll tell you that.
I'm telling you, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, we're getting close to the time where we do our lightning round, which is some benevolent
Mhm,
questions, but we got about 3, 4 minutes before we get to that point.
mhm,
I want to ask you, right now, the work that you do with your clients, you shared a little bit about the grieving and about bringing in loved ones. Is
mhm,
there any other things that you do with people now that we haven't
mhm.
talked about that you feel like is really worth sharing?
Yeah, I teach a lot of online classes. And Rob, way back in around the early 2000s, um, I wrote a book called I See Your Dream Job, where I use numerology to help people find their purpose through their career. Because I believe we all have a meaningful work we've come to do. And even though today most of my clients are grieving clients, I still have probably 25% of my clients are coming to me to find their meaningful work and for me to help guide them through a reinvention to step up to their great work. And again, I use the numbers and intuition and channeled writing to help them. So if anybody out there is feeling like their work is a disconnect from their soul, they need to address that and find a way to make a living that's in alignment with their soul's wisdom. And it's possible, and you can make money from it if you put your heart and soul and follow your birth path information, for example. So that's another part of my work. But working with grieving people, of course, is so close to my heart. But even with them, there's always the question of, so what am I still here to do? So we always do bring that part of the conversation in to say, well, this is what your gifts are. These are what your challenges are. Here's what you're here to offer the world. And I love helping people with that. If everybody on earth realized that they are here with an intentional soul mission of some great work that they brought in uniquely to do, and if they stepped up and did that instead of meaningless jobs, consciousness would shift into the light completely.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and that's one thing I hear constantly as a desire from a lot of people in our community is like, hey, either I want to work in something more spiritual or something that can satisfy my desires to use my talents, gifts, and spirituality
Right.
to help. Like some people are perfectly happy working in a factory. If there's something in that factory that stimulates that part of them that gets, maybe they have coworkers who are also spiritual, or sharing new ideas with new people, whatever the case is. But a lot of
But we
people,
also hit reinvention points, Rob. We each have these 9-year cycles that occur at different times for different people. And when we hit them, suddenly the job in the factory no longer works for us, and our soul is stepping up to the next level. And so we have to realign our career. Our careers are always meant to be kicking it up to the next level. And our personal year cycles in numerology reveal that pattern so beautifully. It really, really helps people.
that is amazing. Yeah, I noticed, I had been channeling for, uh, at this point, it's been 13 years. And I noticed 4 years ago is when we had our baby, so we had to shut things down. But the whole time I'm trying to, how can I go from doing
Mhm.
what I have been doing, working one-on-one with people, to working with more people in groups and doing
Mhm.
things that help more people.
Mhm.
I love working with people personally. It's one of the favorite things, getting to know people and connecting with their energy and giving them channeling. That's great, but I also know that I have such a limited time in my life to
Right.
channel. I only can do it once a day with the kids, and
Mhm.
at least at this stage of my life.
Mhm.
And I want to use that hour for the most benefit to the most people I can. So yeah,
Mhm.
I can see that too, the 9 year cycle. So it makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, we're at the point where it's time where we do our lightning round, which is basically 5, 6, 7-ish questions that are highly benevolent. If you don't want to answer one, we can pass one, but they're to get to know you a bit more,
Yeah.
you personally. So if you're up to that, we'll definitely start
Yep.
playing the lightning round. All right, perfect. Thank you. What is your favorite color?
Now it is gold. It used to be purple.
Purple is still mine, so I can definitely understand that one. Gold too is beautiful. Metallic, shiny gold too. I love that.
Mhm.
Okay, so what is your favorite food?
Hmm. Wow. Well, that has changed a lot in my life. And I think, to be honest, I have to say that I need a little bit of dark chocolate in my life kind of almost every day.
Yeah, who doesn't, right? Have you ever had the Lily's chocolate bars? They're made with stevia as a sweetener instead of sugar.
No, but I was married to a man years ago who started a chocolate company out of our basement, and that chocolate is all over the world, and it's called Choco Love.
Holy moly, that's amazing. So I bet you that's a preferred taste for you.
Well, he has a sugar-free and a very dark chocolate. I like the darkest chocolate you can possibly find. That's what I like, and that has the least sugar in it.
Yeah, see, that was my thing. I used to have a big sweet tooth, but when I went keto, my sweet tooth
Mhm,
dissipated quite tremendously.
mhm.
And now, if I don't have dark chocolate,
Mhm.
it's too sweet. If I
Yeah,
eat a
I agree.
regular candy bar like from the store, it's like,
Oh god,
ugh,
no. I know,
that's
I agree.
horrible.
I mean, any of those chocolate aficionados out there, they know what I'm talking about when I talk about that really deep, dark chocolate. It has almost no sugar. It is such an intense flavor, pure cocoa. That's what I'm after.
Yes, I love that. That's me too. 5, 10 years ago, no, but well, I appreciate that. And what is your favorite song and or band?
Oh, that changes too. The Beatles changed my life in the '60s, and I'll always be grateful for them because they showed me that there was life outside of the South, and they actually motivated me. Their music motivated me to get out of the South and grow up, and I'm so grateful to them. But now, and it's so funny because then Joni Mitchell brought me through my 20s, and so it's like every decade I have these different artists who really speak to me. Um, and today, I don't know, I have an array of different people on my iTunes, but I love a great Chris Stapleton song called Cold. I love some Taylor Swift, and I still find myself going back to Joni Mitchell.
You can't go wrong with Joni Mitchell. I mean,
That's
I
right.
I don't know her discography and I don't know a ton of her songs, but there's
Mhm.
one, the Pay Paradise,
Oh,
Big Yellow
yeah.
Taxi song. I listen to that at least once every couple months.
Well, she channeled in incredible music in her day, and now to see her back performing again after having a stroke, it has been such an inspiring thing to watch.
Holy, I did not know she was still performing or that she had a stroke. I'll definitely have
Yeah.
to check her new stuff out
Yeah.
and check out her live stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. And then what is your favorite animal?
Oh, I'm a cat person. I love my cats. I have Bengal cats. I've had cats my whole life. They're pure intuitive beings, and we just my most close cat that I have right now, Kirabo, we sleep holding hands at night.
Oh, that's so amazing. Cats are lovely in my perspective too because they don't give you what you don't share and create with them. Like a dog will give you love no matter what, and
Mhm,
I love dogs. Dogs have been my favorite types of animals forever.
mhm.
But a cat will reflect back to you your energy with them all the time.
Oh, I don't
It's
know. My
amazing.
cats love on me even when I'm really upset or sick and I can't respond. They will come and sit on me and purr and heal me. That's what I love about cats.
Oh yeah, the Kalina, when she first got pregnant, before we even knew she was pregnant, her cat was loving, but didn't sit on you. She wasn't a lap cat, didn't want to go there,
Mhm.
but she laid on top of her cervix area for like the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then we found out, we're like, wow. So she was just vibrating that purr,
Yes.
helping heal. It was
Yes.
amazing.
That's so cool.
It is. Um, Let me see if I think I'm missing. I keep doing this the last few shows. I'm like, am I missing one or not? The last two questions then. The first one, what is your favorite place you've ever been to in the world for
Mm.
the appreciation of the visual beauty and the energetic beauty of the place?
Mm. Well, I lived in Colorado for 40 something years and I taught mountaineering. And I swear to this day, I remember some of the vistas of standing on top of a 14,000-foot peak. Colorado has a beauty that is just exquisite. You can't even explain it. And I was so blessed to live there. And when I long for something beautiful, that's where my heart goes.
That's beautiful. I've heard Colorado's beautiful. Sheila Seppi is the lady who was on the show, and she lives there, and she's trying to get me out there for the last couple of years. And when we had an event set up, the COVID laws kicked it out. So
Mm,
I'm going to be going there in the next year or so too. I definitely
mhm,
know that, so I can't wait.
mhm,
Um, Last question, and this is the one that, although it was designed to be benevolent, some people with rough childhoods have not uh, had good experience with the question. So this is why I always say you can pass them if you want. But the last question is, what is your favorite childhood memory?
mm. Well, we had a family extended family home in Long Beach, Mississippi, right on the Gulf of Mexico that my great-grandfather built with his own hands, and, so we would gather there with our grandparents, our aunts and uncles and cousins, and in the summer, and that was the happiest place. That was the happy place of my childhood, and, in those moments there, I felt like I was myself and I could be myself. I could be in nature and I could be free and not have to be a Southern girl. I was just a free, free spirit climbing trees and running on the beach and playing in the water. And in 1969, right before I went off to college, Hurricane Camille wiped it off the face of the earth, and it was the most devastating grief. I've written about it in many of my books because it represented a shift in my world, and it was. There was no going back to my childhood after that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's definitely, it's great to know that sense of freedom. I think that's the one thing we can all relate to from our childhood was, unless it was just a total horrific childhood, was there was a sense of freedom in childhood
Hmm.
and that we just don't have there. But this is also where a lot of those wounds come from. And that's why
Hmm.
I resonate with you too. The expression of a child coming from pure consciousness into the
Hmm.
world is very damaging. And that's why all of our traumas that we still hold
Right.
on to are oriented from that past
Hmm.
of childhood for sure. Absolutely. Well, before we're at the point where I want to let you just share anything that you have coming up, share about how to connect with you, find
Hmm.
you if someone wants to work with you, or if
Yeah.
someone wants to read your book. But before we do that, I want to share a couple of my own reflections from today. I want
Hmm.
to say thank you first for coming. Of course, I'm always grateful for people who come to share their experience and have a good talk with me. But for you personally, I really find it inspiring that you're helping people teach to do these things from themselves, especially in grief, which even some of the most spiritually evolved people I know break under that pressure of grief.
Hmm.
It
Yep.
devastated me for years after my father. Still, there's probably trauma there I still haven't unpacked, but
Hmm.
that is such a helpful thing. And also, thank you for being open hearted and open with your sharing, because I think the best people who share from that really deep place in their heart. And I appreciate you
Hmm.
doing that all night with us.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. It's easy to talk to you, Rob.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm grateful to get to know you and connect with you in this way too. I'm sure it won't be the last time we chat.
Mhm. I hope not. So if they want to find out more about my work, they can go to SueFrederick.com, my website, SueFrederick.com, and my books are there, and it shows you how to book a session with me. I'm booked for 6 months, but you can get on my waiting list. And then I have online classes that I'm always teaching, and they're listed on my website, SueFrederick.com. And I'm speaking at the Ian's conference in early September, the International Association of Near Death conference, where people share their experiences. I'll be talking about my shared death experiences, like I had with Paul and Chrissy, and the spiritual lessons that they taught me. And my books, my two latest books are Through a Divine Lens, which you can get on Amazon or in a bookstore or on my website. And it's that vision I told you about and how to shift and align with the light in these difficult times. And my Sacred Numerology Workbook, which is really fun. You can get it on Amazon for $5.99 and do your path, do all your loved ones' paths, look at your soul agreements, and just have fun looking at that and learning about it. It just helps you understand who you are and why you have trouble with certain people and how to see it from the soul's view.
Thank you so much. And I definitely am going to be checking out more and more of your work too. It's always nice to see and connect with that. As little as I had the opportunity to check out before you came on, you've definitely got me very interested in checking out more. So, again, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing. And definitely have you back on when we get back to the circle of repeat people to come in. I definitely have you on that list to come back if you're able to and
Yes.
willing to.
And also, we need to talk about 2024 when the calendar changes and about the numerology of that new year.
Oh, I would love to do that. I would make a extremely great show. Maybe we'll get something up for December-ish area so we can talk about it before the New Year's gets here.
Sounds good.
All right, beautiful. And thank you guys for listening. Everybody out there, we appreciate you guys, brainiacs from the Matrix Minds. It was important enough for me to be with you guys here tonight that I changed the intro to the show because of the problems they're giving Matthew over there. So thank you, Matthew, for helping me get this problem fixed. Thank you guys for being here. And thank you all from the Enlightenment Evolution Hour and the ET Whisperer Facebook. I love you guys, and I love all of you at the Conscious Awakening Network and Forbidden Knowledge News Network. You guys are amazing. All of the links for our guests will be in the description tonight for the website. And also next week, we are going to have on the Sedona group, which will be the first time we've ever had more than 2 guests at once. So it will be a different energy, but it'll be just as amazing energy. And we'll be here as we are every week on Wednesday, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 Pacific. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for supporting us. We love you very much. And we'll see you guys next Wednesday on the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. And we'll see you on the other side. Good night, everybody.